We're ready. This is Let's Talk with John Kane, and now with I want to introduce our new host, Regan.
Hi.
No, it's DeLoggins.
Regan DeLoggins.
All right, I'll make sure I'm putting the right emphasis on the right syllables. Regan. Now, Regan, you are you're Choctaw,
Yes,
Mississippi
Mississippi
Choctaw to be
Choctaw.
specific. Although sometimes that state designation is one of those things that's always a little tough. But anyway,
Yeah.
But you're Choctaw. You live here in the city.
I do.
You are, by most accounts, it's fair to call you a part of the activist community here in New York.
Yeah. I mean, I like agitator. It sounds sexier.
Yeah.
So
Point well
agitator,
taken.
activist, both. I'll take them.
All right, and again, I'm a radio show host, but no, I consider myself an activist with a microphone, and now you have one too.
Yes.
All right, so first things first, we are streaming on Facebook Live, and this Facebook live stream will become a video on my YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. So I've got to start by moving my microphone out of the way just a little bit so people can see I am wearing my Washington Whiteskins shirt, since the Washington Whiteskins won the Super Bowl, or no, the impeachment bowl. The impeachment bowl. Yeah, that's what they won. They won
what it was called.
So the Washington Whiteskins, won the contest in D.C. this week. So it's kind of a knock on that, but it's also, let's be honest, last week was the Super Bowl, and although I can't say I advocated watching the game, one of the things that I heard was that it appears that there was a conscious decision, and it was Fox that carried the Super Bowl. I don't know. I think
That is correct.
Fox.
Fox.
They must have made a conscious decision not to show video of red face and headdresses. Now, they've always done this. I mean, all of the networks, including Fox, they've always done this. But I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means that the networks are finally saying, that is wrong. Because let's be honest. Unless we can figure out some place that blackface is appropriate, I don't know how we can somehow, reconcile that red face is ever appropriate either. I mean, I say this, look, I get it. People want to dress up in a mascot and they want to put all this paint on their face and they want to make a mockery of, imitate, if you want to call it, but mockery is imitation. But I get it brings me back to one other possible scenario. Look, people wear jerseys with names and numbers on them. They put their favorite player on the back, with the numbers on it. So, and in the stands, most of it's white folks. I mean, because white folks are who can afford to go to football games, especially yeah. So, and even to a regular, just a regular football, the Meadowlands. I mean, you look at those, you're going to see some people of color, but most people of color are the ones playing the football, not watching the football. And you see all these white folks with players' jerseys on, and many of those players are black, but they still won't wear blackface. They still won't come in and say, "Look, I'm wearing my, I'm going to wear my Sammy Watkins jersey, and I'm going to go in blackface, or I'm going to put, the dreadlocks on so I can, imitate some of these." They won't do that. Why? Because it's inappropriate, folks. It doesn't matter if you say you're honoring a football player or you're honoring black athletes. It will never be acceptable. And yet, there are still colleges, even colleges who've changed their name, like the University of Illinois, where people are still going to show up with headdresses on. They're still going to show up with red face and all of this stuff. So, the season's done, but the battle over mascot issues continues. There's still high schools that, Donna Fan Boyle, my good friend, joins us on the show on a regular basis, talking about the battle that she's going through with Neshaminy High School. Of course, they're called the R words themselves. And this rages on. So I am going to wear I've got a shirt that not only like this one that says Whiteskins on it, I got one that says Aryans, because I always thought, why not go all out? Why not use why not use a name that really promotes superiority, since that's what you want in a football name, right? That's what you want.
Hey. I support this. I think a C word one would also be good. Crackers.
Oh, I was gonna say I got a Caucasians one too.
Yeah.
Crackers. Yeah, no, and to be clear, I am not really rooting for the Whiteskins. I am making a mockery of a mockery. So I mean, I wasn't really rooting for the Whiteskins, the Republican Whiteskins, or whatever you want to call them, in Washington. But again, I wanted to put my shirt on display. And by the way, if you go to my website, you can find out how to get one of these. So I'll just leave it there. Go to my website, which is letstalknative.com, and there you'll find not only the links to podcasts, our videos, and I've got short form videos as well as videos of the show. I think it's important to do it. All right. Now, I know I talked too much without doing one other mission that we have here. You said day 4. For me, this is day 1 of the fund drive, because this is my first crack, and it'll be, I only get a couple of cracks at this. Although I do talk about supporting WBAI every show, and I will always do that. But we are in fund drive mode, so I am making a specific plea to listeners of this show to go to the pledge line, 516-620-3602. Yeah, Reggie, I got it right the first time. 516-620. You've been saying this number all day for 4 days straight. I don't know how you got it wrong, but anyway, 516-620.
Well, good for you. Good for you.
3602. Or you can go online at www.give2wbai.org. You know, I got to tell you, WBAI is a tough call letter for me, because I always mix it up because of the whole BIA thing. I would bet 50% of the time when I rattle off BAI, I'm saying BIA. And I'm sorry for that. But anyway, give to, that's GIVE, the number 2, WBAI. Don't give to the other one. Don't give to them. Don't like those guys. Give to WBAI. Become a WBAI buddy. And and that simply means that you're a sustaining member, that you make a contribution each month. You give your either credit card information or your checking account information, and it's an automatic payment. You can do it for $5, $10, $20 a month. I mean, the average, I think they say, is $15 a month. Hey, do $15 a month. I greatly appreciate it. And if you list this show, Let's Talk, as the show you're doing it in the name of, and I want to be clear, the money doesn't come to me. The money goes to WBAI. I am a volunteer producer. Look, I'm grateful for the airtime. I'm grateful to have an opportunity to discuss a Native perspective, and now, once again, 2 Native perspectives on the issues we confront. Some of them are Native issues, but some of them aren't. Some of them are just, general issues that affect us all. So, make a contribution to WBAI. Do it in the name of the show. If you do it right now, if you call the pledge line, 516-620-3602, the assumption is that you're listening to the show and you're donating because you're listening to the show. But you can make a donation anytime and still mention Let's Talk, WBAI Let's Talk. So I encourage you to do that. Now, we're a talkback show, and we are going to take calls at an hour or two. So in spite of being in fund drive, we're still going to go to the phones. We had a caller about a month or so ago who suggested that, not everybody wants to be listed. Not everybody wants to be, on the list of donors. Some people want to do it anonymously. So here's the thing. If you want to do it anonymously, go down to the post office. You can get a postal money order. Just fill out, send a check in the pay to the order of, put Pacifica WBAI. Drop it in the mail. You don't have to fill in who it's from. In the memos, you could put Let's Talk. I would greatly appreciate that if you did that. But in the pay the order, just Pacifica WBAI, and then send it to 388 Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, New York, 11217. So now you can be a donor, and you can do this. Hey, you can do it once a month. You can do it once a week if you like. But again, postal money order, nondescript. You're an anonymous supporter. You don't have to carry a tote bag around. This is WBAI. Although if you become a buddy, we'll send you one. You don't have to, be solicited as a member for other issues, and I'll talk about one of those other issues during the show today. But there are any number of ways. You can text. You can go to the website again. Give to WBAI, BAI. I got it right. BAI. Yeah. And you can follow the prompts on how to text a donation. You can, make a one-time donation. You can, you can snail mail, like I said. You can, you can wire transfer. You can do whatever way you want to do it. Your credit card information. The WBAI Buddy program is one of those things that we're trying to get each producer to have to reach a certain number of WBAI buddies. I think I've done that already, but I want more. I would love to see. I think we've got 30 plus WBAI buddies signed up with Let's Talk as the name they're signed up for. I'd love to see that go to 60. I'd love to see every one of us who are on here make sure that we're pulling 30 buddies per hour, let's say, or something along the line. We're a 2-hour show. Thankfully, we're back to 2 hours. So we got the second hour back. Let's get another 30 WBAI buddies signed up. So
wait, so you get a tote bag?
Yeah, you get a tote bag.
That's so important. The plastic bag ban starts March 1st.
Exactly. So now you got a bag that not only says WBA on it, now you can also use that because of the plastic ban. Excellent point. I was going to write that down and I didn't. So glad you're here.
Yes.
Now the other thing, and I've heard other public radio stations do this. It's important that you view a donation to WBAI as an investment. I mean, there are very few things that you can put money into and get something of equal value or greater value in return. But this is one of them. I mean, whether you agree with everything I say or everything Regan will say, it's about the conversation. And it's about so much of the other programming that exists here in WBAI. And for, even for a small donation, you get to take ownership and be a member. Who owns WBAI? It's listener owned. It's listener sponsored.
Listener sponsored.
But essentially, and I'll explain a little bit more about the role that listeners have as we go get into one of a very pressing issue associated with not only with WBAI but all of Pacifica, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But becoming a member is something that people ask all the time. What can we do? I mean, I don't think my vote counts. I don't think one person can't do so much. But in a situation like WBAI, look, we're a bit of a family, and even in a sea of people like New York City, our membership is something that has plenty of room to grow. And so I ask you to become a member and make an investment in something that gives you return 24 hours a day. Look, we're on the air constantly, so we're on all the time. So you can check out our archives. It's programming on demand. And of course, shows like mine where I post it up on YouTube and I do a Facebook live stream. My show also goes into a podcast. If you search Let's Talk Native with John Kane podcast, you'll get my show from back home on Seneca territory and the shows that I do here in New York. And so I welcome you to it. All right. Of course, like I said, we are on Fund Drive. We got a lot of issues that I want to cover in spite of that. I know I've got Reggie queuing up some audio from a news broadcast associated with friends of mine who are fighting a gas line in BC in Wet'suwet'en territory, and we as Mohawks or Gunyagahaga have supported this movement, and they so there's a bit of a broadcast associated with a bunch of my friends and people that I'm associated with who went to Montreal, the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police headquarters, to protest what the RCMP has been doing to these protesters and the blockades and the like. So we're gonna queue up that audio from a CBC broadcast, and then I want to give an update on it. You got that all set? All right. So give this a listen, and it'll give you a little bit more of an overview on what's happening.
A convoy of Indigenous communities drove to RCMP headquarters in Montreal to protest the force's actions in British Columbia. Hereditary chiefs of the Wet'suwet'en Nation have been fighting a natural gas pipeline. They're also not happy about an RCMP checkpoint leading into their territory. Matt Damore reports.
They came to be heard. A convoy of Indigenous communities from across Quebec and Ontario showing solidarity with the Wet'suwet'en First Nation in BC and speaking out against the RCMP.
They put down their laws on us, so This it needs to stop.
The Coastal GasLink pipeline would move natural gas from northeastern BC to the coast. Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs issued an eviction to TC Energy, the company building it, partly in the nation's traditional territory. Last December, BC's Supreme Court granted an injunction allowing the company and its contractors to access the work site. The RCMP set up a checkpoint along the service road that leads to the work site.
It's very important to knowing that we hold on our territory.
Marlene Hale is from Wet'suwet'en. She now lives in Montreal, but keeps a close eye on what's happening back home and the blocked access to her nation's territory.
This is my home. What did I do? This is just my home. Oh my goodness. Now I can't go in because I am Indigenous.
They need to respect our traditional ways and listen to it, and they're not.
Last week, the BC government and Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs announced 7 days of talks to cool down the standoff. The RCMP has said it won't enforce the injunction while that happens. Protesters taped an eviction notice on the Montreal RCMP headquarters and promised more demonstrations in the coming months. Matin Moore, CBC News, Montreal.
All right. And of course, I know what you're all thinking. No, that's Canada. Aren't they nice there? No, not so much. There is major problems between the Indigenous communities, the Native communities, and Canada. Everything from missing and murdered Indigenous women to the same environmental fights that we have that people can immediately, bring Standing Rock to mind or the Keystone XL pipeline. They run these pipelines almost intentionally through Native territories. That way, they don't have. They think they can get away with it. And when you see how Native lands are oftentimes regarded as sacrifice zones, both on the U.S. and the Canadian side. This is just another example of that. And look, I got to specifically, and I'm not trying to patronize women, which actually sounds funny to actually use the word patronizing and women in the same sentence. But I'm not trying to patronize women here, or play to them. But it's a lot of women who are really standing up on this battle. I mean, some of the most prominent fighters, and I don't want to just call them protesters, because they are literally physically resisting.
Land defenders.
They're defending water, land, and environment, air, and I got to give credit to the strong women, and of course, not to take anything away from the men who were there, but a lot of times when people think about the clash, when it actually happens, and it has happened. This morning, I got the early reports that I think as many as a dozen people have been arrested and physically abused in the process. I mean, look, the RCMP aren't nice about it. They aren't exactly loading them into the backseat of a Cadillac. So some of that violence is happening. It has been underway today, and many of those arrested are women. And and I mentioned it before on the program, but people don't realize that the Indigenous population within the Canadian prison system is off the charts in terms of as a percentage of the general population. Indigenous women are among the highest numbers as far as people who are the prison population on the Canadian side. In the U.S. side, we all know that that there's a disproportionate number of black people and Hispanics or Latinx or whatever, brown people. But when it comes to Native people, we are such a small population. Even though it's a large percentage of our population, the numbers don't seem to be there. But it's worth pointing out. So when people say, whatever became of Standing Rock, I'll tell you what happened to Standing Rock. It lit a fire under people that had been fighting a lot of this environmental trespass even before Standing Rock, but now it's invigorated, and we as Mohawk communities, we strongly support all of these water and land defenders. And so I just wanted to give an update, because I did get I get emails and messages specifically this morning about what was going on down there. So
just to add to that as well, so the 13 RCMP units descended on the 39-kilometer trading supply post at the Goodinton checkpoint in Wet'suwet'en land at 4:46 a.m. and arrested 6 folks, most of which were women or femmes. Bear in mind that the the trading post is not in violation of the injunction. I mean, none of this is in violation of the injunction, but specifically the trading post is not in violation of the injunction. And if you are interested in learning more, the Indigenous Kinship Collective, which is a femme, non-binary, and women Native collective that I belong to, will be screening Invasion, which is a film that came out of the Giddentum checkpoint on Monday at 8 p.m. at Luncheonette in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, and we'll be raising funds to send to our relatives, to the land defenders who need as much support as possible. So please come join us on Monday at 8 p.m. at Luncheonette.
Well, and keep in mind, this idea of the RCMP setting up a checkpoint, the checkpoint is to stop Native people. I mean, it is literally to prevent Native people from going on Native lands. Now, whether the courts have given a right for a pipeline to go through Native territories or not does not negate the fact that it's Native lands, and to deny access for Native people on Native lands is preposterous. And again, it's racist. It's it's racial profiling. It's all of those things. And that is the role that the RCMP is. Well, now they're not just manning a checkpoint and stopping people. Now they've gone and are actually arresting people and physically assaulting people
and cutting their trap lines so that they're not able to live sustainably off the land, taking their access to food literally away from them, to starving out the community. To force them
we're not
out.
even talking about what the damage of the pipeline does, which is a whole nother issue, which is why Native people are fighting this one and so many others.
Yes.
So it's again, this is something that is worth keeping an eye on, and we'll talk about this in future shows. Hey, I do have to mention something, and I almost forgot at the beginning. We did a film last week, and Indian Horse, and I'm sorry, but I made Reggie cry.
You lied to me. You lied to me.
I didn't lie to you, Reggie.
You told me it was just a hockey film.
I said there was hockey in it. It was a residential school film, and it is a
seriously though amazing film.
Tough to watch.
Powerful.
Tough to watch. I mean, I get there's a part of the film as I'm watching, I said, if this were true, here's what the reality would be, and they captured all of it. By the film's end, I'm thinking, oh man, they didn't pull the punch. I was afraid they're going to pull the punch, and they didn't. And so I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but it's called Indian Horse. Clint Eastwood signed on as an executive producer of this thing. I don't know that he actually had anything to do with the film, frankly. I think it's one of those deals. I think he lent his name to the film to give the film a boost, and I appreciate that. I'm not a big Clint Eastwood fan of politically. I think he's done some decent films. I don't know that he had much of a role in the actual production of this film, but his name is associated with it, and I think he offered that to give the film a boost because he liked the film. So if you do check it out, if you see the name Clint Eastwood associated with it, you'll understand why. But it's produced on the Canadian side. In fact, I know some folks now who are actually involved in the film, and it is a tough film to watch. Look, it can't explain it all. Here's the thing about the residential schools and what people went through there. Oftentimes, everybody thinks, well, yeah, but once it's over, isn't it over? People don't understand about the legacy of this kind of trauma that people go through, and the fact that these residential schools had graveyards, and they had at some points and in some schools as high as a 50% mortality rate. I mean, look, I this report about finding these mass graves in Tulsa, coming out of the I don't know why they call it a Tulsa riot. They should call it what it is, a massacre. Regardless of whatever the total numbers they come up with, and they've been diminishing those numbers historically, since first reporting on it. But there are mass graves that still have not been uncovered in association with these residential schools. Some of them are just massive graveyards, marked, some unmarked, but there's also places that people were just dumped. And it's important to also realize that these schools were church run, and I say schools with the most general, applicability of that word, I guess. As I said in the school or in the film, there were no tests, there were no grades, there were no, by any measure, the only test was the test of survivability.
Exactly, and assimilation.
And so
the end,
assimilation was what it was really all about. Stripping, kill the Indian, save the man. Yep. And this is a textbook definition of genocide. You know, even if you take away the death, just the assimilation component of it. So a powerful film. We had a full house. I appreciate it. We in fact we raised $250 that I'm gonna what I do is I put out a donation basket to collect money. I give the money to the landlord here at 388 Atlantic Avenue. So not only do I collect money for WBAI, but I actually spend it for them. I make it so it is given towards the rent and other charges associated with our studio facilities here at 388 Atlantic Avenue. So I want to thank people for coming out. I know the schedule's a little mixed up this month because of Fund Drive, but I do plan to do another event on the 27th, I think, the last Thursday of, even if I'm not on that Thursday, I may not be, but I will be here to do an event. I haven't decided what film we're going to do here, but maybe
we should do Invasion.
No, maybe we'll do Invasion,
yeah.
And that might be very, very timely and obviously topical. So we'll do a film, and then we'll, as always, have a discussion afterwards. So that's I try to do everything the last Thursday of every month. I know March I'm doing it the third Thursday because of a conflict, but we're in the last Thursday of February. We will be doing an event as well. So again, come out and join us. It is usually a great conversation, and last week was no exception. Interestingly, though, I had trouble leaving. So Thursday, as I tried to get out of Brooklyn, the subways were all a mess. I went down to the A train here at Schermerhorn Station, and there were cops all over the place, and the train wasn't running. And you go down, and they have a monitor that says delayed with no explanation to how long. So, after a long day of travel here to New York and doing an event, I walked from that station to the 2 train down here at Fulton Mall and Hoyt. And apparently the 2 train doesn't run at night anymore. I didn't know that, but so that train wasn't there. So then I had to walk from that station to the Nevin station to catch the 4 train to go to Grand Central Station. But there were there was a lot of confusion. Not just for me. There were a lot of people who were confused. They offered a voucher, but in many of these other subway stations, there was nobody to take the voucher. So guess what people did? They jumped turnstiles.
Yeah.
But so then I find out the next day after I finally get home, I did make it to Port Authority to take my bus back home. I find out that the FTP, and now I know what you're asking. What does FTP stand for? Good question, because it's got a few different things. But the FTP movement, New York City, had their event last Friday, which significantly disrupted the subways. But I didn't know was somebody getting an early start on Thursday night. I don't even know. But all I know is one of the things that was clear, me and Jeff and a few others who were trying to hoofing it together, we realized just how vulnerable New York City is. And look, if there is a technical failure, forget about protest. If there is anything that crashes here, I mean, we know what happened with Superstorm Sandy. I know the chaos that was taking place just at 10:30 at night. Imagine if that were 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Look, infrastructure is great when it works, and it can be very disruptive when it doesn't. Which kind of leads me back to Sowetson, because one of the things that the Canadian government does these reports, and I've talked about this before, McDonald-Laurier reports, and they did an analysis on the likelihood of an insurgency in Canada, from Indigenous people. And one of the things that they determined is that the infrastructure of Canada is very, very vulnerable. It's vulnerable because of many of the remote sites that it's on. The fact that they run them through native territories. Our sacrifice zones also place those pipelines and power lines and rail lines in jeopardy. And and I got a good example of just Thursday night what a failure of infrastructure could look like, even in off-peak hours. But look, we're at the bottom of the hour, so we're going to take a break here. When we come back, Regan, we're going to talk about FTP,
Let's do
NYC. So we'll talk about that when we come back. This is John Kane and Regan, and we'll be back right after this. Let's go back and do a radio show. So here we are. Thanks for coming back. This is John Kane.
Sure. Since you ask, I mean, whatever. Yeah.
And lots to talk about. And look, we're still commenting about my shirt here. Speaking of white skins, there was the State of the Union address, where the President of the United States once again invoked the expression "manifest destiny."
Gotta go.
Of course, it wasn't enough. Just that manifest destiny is just an absolute racist policy that existed in the continent. Now he's saying, well, we got to take it to space. But I think it's important to remember that the other term or expression that went right alongside with manifest destiny was called white man's burden.
Yeah.
And people want to forget that. So, you say manifest destiny, I hear white man's burden. And of course, it's a white man who's burdening us all with his BS. Now, the only thing I do have to say about the State of the Union address was all of the hype over Nancy Pelosi ripping up the speech. Oh, look, it was a nice visual and that kind of stuff. But the most offensive thing that Nancy Pelosi did wasn't ripping up the president's speech. It was being one of the first to her feet to give a standing ovation when Trump introduced Juan Guaido, the fake Coopster implant in Venezuela. I mean, so when I see the complicity that the right and the left have with each other on things like regime change in Venezuela, or funding ridiculous amounts of money to the military, which includes things like building a border wall and so many other things. Look, Nancy, I get it. You're a politician, and this is where I always come back to saying racism isn't just a right thing, it's a white thing. And so when I talk about the white skins, look, you look at the makeup of the House and the Senate. And granted, there's some diversity there, but the disproportionate number of white males, but even white folks who are part of the governing structure, not only of the United States. Look at any of the previous colonial or settler colonial developments. Bolsonaro got mentioned on Democracy Now. Bolsonaro, look at the Parliament of Brazil. And look at how disproportionately white it is. Look at Juan Guaido, who represents the whiter side of Venezuela. Look at this, and I can't even think of the woman's name in Bolivia. Yeah, what's the woman's name there? I can't even remember her name. But again, another self-proclaimed president, and this is a white woman. I mean, I'm sorry. Why are you hanging up on the white? Because if you look at these countries, you're ignoring the racial component when you look at Evo Morales versus his replacement, Nicolas Maduro versus Juan Guaido. I mean, and who does the United States support? Not the ones who were democratically elected. No, they support the ones that promote capitalism and U.S. ideals.
Yep, absolutely.
So. Anyway, I'm sorry. It's hard for me to get too excited about folks like Nancy Pelosi, ripping up paper.
Well, it's just so performative, like we were speaking
about.
That's
a white-on-white crime, isn't it? Ripping up white paper.
White paper. It's just so performative, and it doesn't move any of the dialogue forward. And diversity in Congress, within Senate, like for me, those are just like non-factors, especially considering that, like, for example, everyone's so behind AOC, when in fact she voted twice to continue to fund ICE, but then says that there needs to be an abolishment of ICE, but then is continuously voting to fund. So in the end, these are just performative actions.
I feel the same way about Deborah Haaland and Sharice David. Look, white folks voted them in, and that's who they represent. I mean, let's be clear.
I don't feel represented in those. Well, then again, I'm not looking to be represented.
I didn't hear, and I realized that, Trump just put Kansas City in Kansas because he doesn't understand where Kansas City is. But I didn't hear the congresswoman from Kansas weighing in on the the Kansas City team's name or the red face.
Did you read the article in Indian Country?
Oh
by
yeah, about where
Vincent
that name
Schilling,
comes from.
where the name came from?
Yeah, I talked about it last show. It's named after the white guy who was the mayor. It was even named after Native people. Yeah, it's crazy.
I love the comment that like it was because white folks always say like, oh, we're honoring you with our with the Blackhawks, with the Atlanta Braves, with the Indians, with all those horrible with the Redskins, and then I love that, and it was like very clear just even in that article that. No, it was stated that we have no intention to pay homage to Native folks.
Yeah. And we don't care what Native people think.
No,
I mean, in fact, we're going to lie about it. We're going to create, false polling where somebody only has to self-identify as a Native person to back up our claim and all that stuff. I mean, look, when somebody else tries to say, I'm going to commit an act and I'm going to decide whether the act hurts you or not. That's like punching somebody and saying, I get to decide whether I hurt you or not.
Of course.
Yeah. But anyway, all right. I don't want
They're honoring us.
I don't want to belabor the point. I do want to get onto the FTP thing. So FTP, I've heard multiple breakdowns on what FTP stand for. Originally, I think it was supposed to, originally came out as Feed the People. Then it was For the People. Then it was as it got tied to the crackdown by police in the subway stations and the addition of additional subway police, it turned to F the police. So that's what we have. We have FTP, and in New York, it did turn into a bit of a subway action.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about what you know of what took place and what may be in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, okay, so FTP has, as we said, multiple names. It's F the police, it's Feed the People, it's Fight the Power, Feel the Power, F the pipelines, F the prisons, Free the prisons, F the pilgrims, F the politicians, F the prophets, I'm reading from a list.
I got to add one of these. I got to make one up.
Yeah, For the People. So there's a lot happening there. But the reason that we focused our action on J31 on the subways is because the MTA has just recently voted to add an additional 500 new cops into the subway stations, which is going to cost an additional $250 million. And not to mention that, I am anti-cop. I'll say it loud. And the idea of continuously adding violence into our subway systems, who are going to specifically target Black and brown youth for things like fare evasion, which is it's $2.75. Point is, it's an incredibly violent system, and the continued and the additional violence added to it is just inappropriate. We have 4 requests that have been made to the city of New York related to FTP, which is that we want all cops out of the subway. We want completely free transit and the end of harassment of vendors and performers, as well as full accessibility for people of varying disabilities. It is a problem that they are hiring cops, but the elevators don't work.
Or the escalators or anything else.
Or the escalators. Yeah. It is a problem that they are hiring cops, and then those cops are just there to monitor and protect a price. An invasion, an evading fare rather than
clear,
the people.
The New York City Police is like an army. I mean, what is it, like 50,000 people strong or something like that? Yeah.
It's also militarized and funded and provides, and it gets weaponry from Safariland, which is owned by Warren Kanders, and is a whole thing that happened. And they're a militarized group.
The whole police thing. And here's where I have a big problem with it, because even as I speak out on the missing and murdered Indigenous women, men, children, girls, that issue, a lot of times people will say, well, if we need new laws, need new more police and everything else. There are plenty of laws in place. I mean, it's illegal to kill people. It's illegal to kidnap women. The sex trade is illegal. All of that stuff is illegal. There's a lot of things that the police are doing that are illegal. Not only are the police involved in some of this, and it's very, very highlighted in some of what was done with the Commission on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women on the Canadian side, but even on the U.S. side, these agencies are failing to report the missing people. I mean, there's a couple of studies that have been done recently that highlight the number of women who have been killed in what they're calling homicide clusters. And part of it is a failure to report these things in a timely manner. So the statistics never end up being accurate. And if they use the resources they already have, not throwing more cops, or what Trump suggested he was going to throw $1.5 million at U.S. attorneys' offices that was supposed to help. Look, the FBI already has all kinds of systems in place to evaluate numbers like this, because the truth is, some of these things may be actual serial killers, not just a culture of misogyny throughout the white communities. It's that too. But there's enough evidence based on some of these homicide clusters that there may be serial killers at play, and nobody cares.
Well, specifically because serial killers who often are white men are always going to participate in misogyny. Like, this is just a way for them to participate with a group and a population of folks that are the most targeted
and most marginalized, and are in rural areas, where they are more vulnerable. And I don't want to take this away from the FTP discussion.
Well, it's
completely,
all related, I think.
But again, the idea of how you shift resources associated with the difference between maintaining peace and order and police presence and aggressive police presence is part of the problem. So when I see this FTP movement taking on various, not only descriptions in terms of what FTP stand for, but as they go from location to location here in the city, I get it. I mean, I just got a real tiny glimpse, because I don't live here and I'm not here every day, just how much people depend on the subway system and how vulnerable people can be because of it. But the idea, that people who are oftentimes so marginalized economically are going to be held to some. I mean, this is where law enforcement and crime and punishment crosses into not just class lines but racial lines. And the folks that are going to be targeted for turnstile jumping or whatever else are going to be disproportionately covered.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
interrupt. People call it. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say that the expose just came out that 7 officers of the NYPD came forward and said that they were specifically told by their superiors to target Black and brown folks. So that came out maybe like a month ago. And on top of all of that, we can't divorce the fact that police come from a inherently racist history. Police came out of slave patrols and night watchers, and then they later became, or also as a way to monitor police and violently remove Native folks off their land. So we have then this inherently racist system brought into an urban space, and what can we expect but continued violence?
Well, and again, the etymology of police officers, really, when you get down to it, it comes from protecting personal property.
Of course.
And the class that had personal property were the white aristocrats. So, I mean, again, their function wasn't just to have a strict reading of the penal codes. It was to protect the property of white folks.
Well, if you think about it, slave patrols helped maintain the economic order and assist specifically wealthy landowners to get back their property, which were people and land. Cops have always been there to protect property over bodies, over people, over humans, especially if they're brown.
I'm sorry. As soon as you mentioned slave patrols and keeping order, I had to go to listen to one of Rush Limbaugh's quotes. While he doesn't advocate returning to slavery, he said the streets were safer then. That's literally one of the Presidential Medal of Freedom award winner, Rush Limbaugh, who is again. I'm sorry, I had to mention it.
Well, we also have to talk about how when police look to convince more people to become police, they specifically go to poor white neighborhoods because it creates a lateral oppression in which you're providing poor white folks the opportunity to feel as though they have power in a system that's based inherently in capitalism. So you have rich folks and the police that are there to protect the rich folks, who are often poor white people, sometimes people of color, in order to create lateral violence against communities of color. It's all thoughtful. It's not like it's I haven't thought about this before.
We know that this is a movement that's going to continue.
Yes,
I don't know if there's any new dates that have been put out there, but I'm sure there will be, and we'll stay on top of it. Look, I mentioned earlier on when I was talking about us being in fund drive mode and how much we need you to support WBAI financially. By making a donation, going to our pledge line, 516-620-3602, going to our website, give2wbai.org, becoming a buddy, becoming a one-time donor, whatever suits your best approach towards supporting and again, investing in this radio station. I also mentioned that there's something else, and that's something else. I know it's been mentioned by a few other programs. We survived a bit of a coup here at WBAI when a faction of the Pacifica National Corporation's personnel came in to shut down WBAI and then just pipe in, some broad milquetoast general Pacifica programming. I say that having been one of the ones that were piped in for one of the initial shows.
It was the exception to the
rule.
rule.
Was the exception.
That's right.
And it only happened once, and I didn't give permission for it. But so we survived that coup. We got the station back, but we're not out of the woods here. I mean, not only are we still in trouble financially, but the powers that be that were trying to take over WBAI didn't stop there. And in fact, there is an effort right now by a group within the Pacifica family to not only change bylaws, and that's what's being put out there as, oh yeah, they're trying to change the bylaws for the Pacifica Corporation. No, they're trying to change the entire structure of the governance of Pacifica. They're trying to do away with local station boards. And look, however people feel about our own local LSB over the years and some of the factionalism that exists, but this effort is to eliminate local station boards for all 5 Pacifica stations, to lower the threshold on what is required to make things like purchases, big purchases, and sales, including the sale of the WBAI signal. So the effort was voted down by every LSB in the Pacifica National Network, or the Pacifica Network. Every LSB voted down. However, this group took it to court, and they went into California State Court, and they argued that the LSBs shouldn't be making this decision, that it should be put to the listener members. Now, we obviously have listener members who are part of the WBAI listener membership, which makes them part of the Pacifica listener membership. The problem is the California stations have bigger numbers. So they're going to try to do a referendum, and they got a court to support them doing a listener member referendum. That referendum, the ballots for this referendum are going out on February 15th. It's just right around the corner. So those of you who are members of the WBAI will get these ballots. Now, if you're not sure, if you believe you're a member and you have nothing that suggests, that backs that up, contact WBAI. If you made donations, if you're a buddy, there's the threshold is pretty low to be a member. But if you've made contributions to WBAI, you should be listed as a listener member. And make sure that you're on that list, because you will be getting a ballot sent out to you on the 15th of February. It is so important that a big percentage of our listener members send back in the ballot voting no for the changes. These changes are a death knell to WBAI. And look, they've got bigger numbers in California. They've got more numbers in the couple of California stations than all the East Coast stations combined. So we're at a bit of a disadvantage. So we need a higher turnout. We need a higher percentage of returns on these ballots. So again, you will be getting a ballot sent to you if you are listed on as a WBAI listener member. It'll be sent out on February 15th. It is important that don't put it in the junk mail pile. Make sure that you take these ballots, fill them out, vote no, and send them in. This is something. Look, you paid for the right to weigh in on this. That's what you not only invest in the radio station for the programming, but you invest in the radio station because you have say. And this is going to strip that away. This, and not only is it stripping away the LSB, but it's even lowering the threshold for what percentage of listeners have to weigh in on other future referendums. This is also an effort to undermine the last election, to not seat any of the folks who were voted in on the last Pacifica National Board, and actually to try to even do away with the Pacifica National Elections Supervisor. I mean, it's crazy on so many different levels. So again, look for this coming out to you. And I wanted to make sure that I gave this some adequate attention today. We will talk about this more as we go forward, but this is my last chance to do it, so because I think we're preempted next week as a part of this fund drive. So again, you're hearing it from me, you're hearing it from Let's Talk. Make sure that when you receive these ballots, and make sure you do receive a ballot. You know, again, if you have a question about whether your membership is valid, contact WBAI and find out. Make sure that you're on there, and so you'll get a ballot sent to you, and you can vote no for this thing. I wanted to throw that out there. One other parting shot before we take a break, and we are going to go to your calls. So next hour, it's all about you guys. We are in fund drive mode. So again, I got to remind people that the pledge line is 516-620-3602. But I had one other tidbit I wanted to throw out there. I mentioned it during the break here. Look, we get into a lot of battles, or hear a lot of battles being fought between the religious right and the left, and what Trump's agenda was in terms of appointing Supreme Court nominees, and how one of the litmus tests was all about abortion and reproductive rights. Men who want to assert the power over women on reproductive rights, which I have a big problem with. But here's the interesting thing. As strong as both the right and the left are in terms of advocating for Israel, but specifically the evangelical right, their position on Israel, white supremacy groups notwithstanding, it's interesting that in Israel, not only are abortions legal, but they're paid for by the government because they have socialized medicine in Israel. So all of these people who are so pro-Israel and so pro, settler colonialism, as was mentioned earlier, it is really important that people understand that the United States, who funds Israel to the tune of billions of dollars every year, is supporting a country, and I'm not condemning them for having legalized abortions, but this is the compromise that even those who are so rigid in their so-called religious beliefs they'll look the other way on Israel being having state-sponsored healthcare, including abortions, as long as they can still be anti-Palestinian, as long as they can still be pro-settler colonialism, as long as they can still be right-wing.
Well, everything boils down to settler colonialism.
Yeah, it really does.
As long as you can maintain access to land and brown and black bodies, then everything else is out the window. And the religious right will come up with some way to justify it, and interlope within the work that is being done as a means to maintain and justify settler colonialism. Yeah.
Well, and I throw that out there because I haven't heard much talked about this subject, but it is clear that that people have no problem compromising their views on strong issues like that when they can accomplish another agenda. All right, we're at the top of the hour, so we're going to take a break. We'll come back to your calls. We will be taking phone calls at 212-209-2877. Obviously, we threw a lot out at you. We are in fund drive mode, so anybody wants to give WBAI, a high five here on the phone, then by all means do that as well. But we'll take your calls, 212-209-2877. When we come back, this is John Kane with Regan DeLoggins.
It's me.
And we'll be back after this. All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane with Regan DeLoggins, and Regan, introducing her as our new co-host. Now, we didn't do anything to Shawnee.
No.
In fact, Shawnee's your friend. She's my friend, and
she's the best.
Shawnee helped make the connection to bring. Shawnee just had other things she wanted to deal with, and we're hoping she's still going to stop by and join us.
Absolutely.
From time to time. And so no, we didn't do anything to Shawnee. We didn't get rid of her. She's alive and well, as far as I know. But again, you've decided to step up and fill the chair, and hopefully we can take the show in some other directions as well with your participation, and that's what we're looking forward to.
No, I'm really excited. I mean, I guess I should introduce myself.
Sure, go ahead.
But
give a
here's
little information on yourself here.
Sahachafayuk, Regan, Mississippi, Chata Siyahoke, Mitili Canarsie. Hi, my name is Regan DeLoggins. I'm Mississippi Choctaw. I live on unceded territory of the Canarsie, also known as Brooklyn. I'm an agitator, an activist, a curator, a historian, an art historian based here in Manahata on Lenape-Hoking. And I'm just so excited to be here and stir it up. Let's do it.
All right. Well, there you got it. That's her brief description. But you'll get to know. Look, the more you listen to the show, the more you get to know both of us, and you'll get to know Regan as well as myself as we go forward. We are opening up the phone lines. The number is 212-209-2877. But I want to remind people we are in fund drive mode, and I really. This is almost a desperate ask at this point. We need you to step up. We need not only do we need you to donate and fulfill this listener-sponsored radio commitment by making a donation, calling our pledge line 516-620-3602, or going online to www.give2wbai.org. That's GIVE, the number 2, WBAI.org. We need you to make donations, but we also need you to spread the word. Look, we know word of mouth has a lot to do with it. I do what I can. We put some stuff up on social media. I try to do some Twitter announcements. We stream the show on Facebook Live. I put the show up on YouTube. The show goes up as a podcast. It's in our archives at WBAI, and of course, we stream live at WBAI.org, and we broadcast at FM 99.5 in the middle of your FM dial here in New York City. So we need your support. So please do contribute, and make sure you do it in the name of Let's Talk. It sends a message to everybody, that you enjoy the show, or at least you're stimulated by it, even if you don't sometimes feel like I made you happy, because I made Reggie cry last Thursday. So
you lied to me.
All right, let's go to the phone line. Look, when I go to first off, you need to turn your radio down. But and I ask what your name is and where you're calling from, not to pry. You don't have to give me your real name. I just like to, I want to make it a little bit more friendly and personable. So when I ask you what's your name, where you're calling from, I'm not tracking you. I'm not stalking you. So
I am.
All right, let me. I guess we need headphones now. I need this one. Okay. Yeah. All right. I've got different headphones for different purposes. All right. Let's go to the phone line. Caller, you're up first. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Wendy.
Hi, Wendy.
I'm calling from Lenape Country, also known as Springfield, New Jersey.
All right. Well, it's good to hear from you.
Yeah. Well, I was at the movie last night, so I just two or three things to say quickly, because I know there are other callers on the line. What happened with the train, I tried to get home at 10:15. I got home at 2:30 in the morning.
Wow.
All right. What happened with the train, John, is that somebody jumped or fell on the tracks. And so there were people, you didn't see them maybe, but people came with stretchers and things. All right. So when I went in, too, people were coming up, and that's what happened.
I suspected there was something like that because that was the immediate. I saw there were emergency vehicles, but then it seemed like there was confusion across multiple lines, not just the A train line. So I don't know. It seemed more confusing. Like there was some systemic issues as well, but I didn't know.
Well, I went to the 2 too, but I think they had been shut down. That was something they were doing already to work on some track thing. I'm a native New Yorker, but I live in Lenape land now. So I think that was something. They were working on the tracks from 9:30 to whatever every night. So and anyway, I eventually got home because my life partner picked me up in Newark. But anyway,
yeah, I thought we were gonna have to rely on a taxi, but at some point we went to 2, then we went over to the 4 train at Nevins, and I did get there, and I was getting a little nervous because I had to catch a bus at a certain time. So, but if it took me till 2 o'clock in the morning, I would have been sleeping in a bus station, I'm afraid. So
no, I had a friend, but he between us, he walked me through it. The path runs all night.
Yeah.
And so you can always get home you can get as far as Newark, and we're not far from Newark, which was nice of him. He didn't have to come at 2:30 in the morning. I did have a friend who would put me up, but he said he would come. But that's why he's my life partner, because he's so wonderful. But the movie that you showed, Indian Horse, was really upsetting, and I thank you for that. And I knew a little bit about it, a little bit. And I got I have gone to the library and I've gotten the novel that it's based on. But I'm also reading nonfiction books. And what you tell people, they always ask for one book. There's no such thing as one book about a whole culture. You know, you could spend 30 years and you wouldn't find out everything you need to know. Always look in the bibliography and get some more books, and then look at the bibliography there and get some more books, and you keep going.
Right.
You know?
Well, and one of the important things, and that's why I do the films and I do the events, it's not enough just to experience it by yourself. If you don't engage people with a conversation about it, because look, 5 people can read a book and get different takeaways from it. So it's sometimes important to have a discussion about it, because somebody could point something out that you may have missed, and I think it's really important to none of this stuff should be done in a vacuum. So I think it's just as important to not only read and observe, but to converse and have conversations about these things.
Well, I belong to 5 book clubs, and I am going to recommend this one. And you get to run the discussion if you suggest the book.
Sure, good.
So,
well, Wendy, I would also suggest for your next book club that y'all read Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. It is that one book that I recommend for folks to get started on learning the true history of the occupied United States. So try that one out next time.
Well, I did take that out.
Okay.
I didn't get to finish it, but I did take that out. And I also treasure the bibliography. So that is an excellent book, as you say, and I'm definitely going to be reading that.
Another book that I have to recommend is Killers of the Flower Moon by David Grann. It's about the Osage murders, and in fact, the subtitle is Killers of the Flower Moon: The Osage Murders and the Birth of the FBI. And ironically, it's these mass killings that are happening in Osage territory in Oklahoma, a mere 50 miles away from Tulsa, where you have the Tulsa massacre and the Osage massacre, which may have stretched out over decades. This is a New York author. It's David Grann, who writes for the New Yorker. He wrote this book. He did an excellent job. It is a film that's supposed to be made, or a book that's supposed to be made into a film.
Scorsese jumped on it.
But I'm always a little apprehensive about when somebody big tries to make this a major motion picture. I don't want it to be about heroizing the FBI, because there was a lot of shortcomings, and David Grann accurately portrays that in the book. So if you get a chance, that's another one that's worth checking out.
Okay, I'm taking notes. I saw Mississippi Burning, and that was
there you go.
That was a complete lie. And my last point is this: I understand exactly what you say about people who say, "Oh, I have First Nations blood in my family." But if you don't have the stories and you have nothing about the culture, I mean, all I know about my great grandparents on my father's side was that they were named Bibb and Leek, and they didn't have last names, so they were given a common anglicized name so they could get married. I mean, I know nothing about the culture. I know nothing of the stories, because my mother and father broke up, and I didn't get to talk to, the family about the stories that, my grandfather, who was a black Indian, had told them. So, you can't, I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have a sense of community. If you don't have not just your immediate family, your mother, your father, your grandmother, your grandfather, if you don't have that, if you don't have a connection with a community, it's hard to know what the experience is. And to be Native isn't just about a blood quantum.
Oh, it has nothing to do with blood quantum.
And because I know plenty of assimilated people, and it's not their fault necessarily, but plenty of people who have been completely deculturalized and then reacculturalized, which is a part of that whole denationalization war crime that that countries were doing all over the world, but certainly never got the attention when it came to what Native people really thought. The idea of assimilating Native people was doing good. I mean, they tried to make that argument. I don't know if they really believe that or not, but that's what that's what the U.S. policy and the Canadian policy, much of South America, Africa, Australia, was all about, was to try to if not eliminate a people physically, eliminate them by distinction.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say about that is there was I can't remember whether it was the American This American Life or another one of the radio shows. they did a very whitewashed program about the residential schools. And I listened to it, and I was like, this is not right. Having seen the movie, I said, this is a whitewash. This is not a really good portrayal of what was happening. They found somebody who was in their 80s who said how wonderful it was, at the schools, and I said, this is not.
Indian Country Today had a contributor for a number of years who used to talk about how wonderful his experience was, and that's not to say that you couldn't find somebody who was Jewish who didn't have the same level of horror that other Jewish people went through in the Holocaust. And so when I hear somebody saying, "Oh yeah, we did Christmas plays, and I got to play Joseph or something like that," or and it was also a different situation for people who went to residential schools. If you were already a Christian, if you were already spoke English, if you had all of those things, if you were part of the way there, your experience was completely different than if you're somebody who was literally stripped from people steeped in their own culture. And so when I hear people tell these stories that, well, it wasn't that all that bad, or they talk about some of the pleasantries of it. Look, I understand, the poverty that people were ripped from to even attend these residential schools. I understand what the U.S. policy had done to Native peoples and Native territories. So when people try to say, well, it was a step up from life at home, well, that's part of the problem too. That's part of the problem too. Well, Wendy,
it's complicated.
I want to thank you so much for the call, and thanks for coming out. Usually the last Thursday of every month. That'll be the case this month. I think it'll be the third Thursday in March because of a scheduling issue. But we do announcements, so you'll know. But we try to do something once a month. Well, sometimes we have to miss a month, but we try to do something once a month, and we probably will do this film that you're talking about. What's the name again?
It's Invasion.
Invasion.
It came out from the Gittatum checkpoint of the Wet'suwet'en people.
So it's talking about the event we were specifically talking about earlier. So anyway, do we got another caller lined up yet? All right, let me go get the number up. The number is 212-209. 2877. That's the number called to be a part of the show. I do want to remind people we are in fund drive mode, and the more money we can raise in the shortest possible time, the shorter we can make these fund drives. So if you make a contribution to WBAI in the name of the show, I would greatly appreciate it. And the more of you who do, the quicker we can get back to our regular scheduling. The number to call is 516-620-3602. You can go online at www.give2wbai.org. That's GIVE, the number 2, WBAI.org, and you can make a contribution that way. One-time donation, become a buddy. You do it all in the name of the show, and and it all goes to the same place. But we get credit for that. So so give us a mention. All right, we'll go to the caller again. Caller, you're up next. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Yes, hello, good afternoon. Once again, the Phantom calls in from Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. Remember the Phantom?
Yes, of course I do.
Yes, you do, sure.
Did you come out to the movie last week? I thought I saw you, but then you didn't stick around.
You know why?
Why?
Here we go. And that was the number one issue. I'd like to discuss two issues with you. One was the film from last week, and the second one is that New York City subway trip that you were rightfully moaning and groaning. Let's do the subway really fast.
All right, do the subway first. Go ahead.
New York City subway system, it's the worst in the world. I've traveled. I've been around about a third of the world. The New York City transit system is the worst in the world. If I was a mayor, the bicycle mayor of New York City, I would pay the people to go onto that subway. Are you kidding? Keep laughing. What a disgrace. My God in heaven. What a ripoff. And it's done on purpose. And this is to keep the people oppressed and down and just crush them up.
Well, it is a bit of a crushing experience just to take the subway, and I got to admit, I mean, it is so terrible.
Absolutely, and it's done on purpose. You take some of these trains, you get onto that IRT, that number 2, 3 train and all. Mm-hmm. My God, that thing rocks like you're on a bull. How could a pregnant woman ever get onto that kind of a subway system and get thrown around?
Yeah. No.
It's absolutely disgraceful. This is your capitalism for you.
Yeah.
You bet. And those horrible trains run right by Wall Street. So there you are, buried under the ground in this thing, and right above you are the masters of the world.
It's also
looking
important
down.
to note that, like, so last week we had a discussion about the subways at Verso Books, open to the public, and one of the things that we talked about was when you enter the subway platform, how it looks so similar to a jail cell, and the idea of being incarcerated, and that the
whole city
aesthetic
looks
is
like a
meant to
jail cell.
exactly, it's meant to invoke
The whole city.
fear, fear-mongering, and to then submit to the powers that be. So what would the subway look like if we actually made it for the people, by the people? Would we removing the turnstiles, removing the gates, having comfortable seating, making it putting plants in the subway? Like, this might seem ridiculous, but in fact, so many of us spend half of our day commuting that we should be making this not just free and accessible, but an enjoyable process.
Yeah, I agree.
My view on that is later for the subway system. Why aren't the people transporting themselves in beautiful carriages drawn by horses? Why aren't the people absolutely? That's why I'm the bicycle mayor. Why aren't they transporting themselves by bicycles? An excellent way to get around is jogging.
Well, we also have to have access for people of varying abilities.
Yeah, and
that's true.
And there are
Right,
people
the
who have
varying
mixed feelings
ability.
about how the horses of New York City have been treated. So,
They are treated
but anyway, Phantom, you had another.
treat them beautifully, the horses. I'm not saying you're using those horses from Central Park as an example. Sure, that's a travesty, but it doesn't have to be that way.
I agree. All right, you had another issue you wanted to bring up, so go ahead and get to your other point.
Film and why you're right, I did leave. Why did I leave? I am described as being oversensitive, and I left. It was towards the beginning of that film. Wow. And they're whipping the kids, and they're torturing and whipping the kids. I can't see that crap. I can't watch it. No way. Okay, that's just me. And that's why I walked out.
Okay,
I can't watch children being tortured.
Well, but the problem is, if people don't know that this existed, then they cannot rationally understand what brings, like they said in the film. I mean, if you don't know where you've been, you don't know where you're going. And I think when people don't understand what Native people are faced with today and how directly connected it is to that, that abuse that took place. So no, I get it. It was tough to watch.
Hold on, and then there's a follow-up to this whole thing. Are you or any of your audience or people, are you aware that several blocks, right down the block from WBAI, is a capitalist torture chamber for Brooklyn called the Brooklyn House of Detention?
Oh, yeah.
You know about that Brooklyn House of Detention?
Isn't that the one that was investigated because they shut the heat off and everything else? And all that?
Yeah, it's about a block and a half down from us.
Yeah.
It's outrageous. And why am I the only one that brings this up?
Well, it was only...
I've always felt that the people, after they have these meetings at WB, should march down the goddamn metal monster Atlantic Ave, metal monster cart and go to that prison and make a scene and shut it down.
Well, and this thing, that prison, of course, there's no such thing as a good prison, but that one's been under investigation multiple times, and they seem to they just keep it going. It's a good point. All right, Phantom, I want to thank you for calling. I appreciate you coming out to the film. I can't promise that that other films aren't going to be equally disturbing. It's not that I'm trying to crush people. I'm really trying to let people know what some of the true history is, and drag people out of the fantasy world that their upbringing has brought them, has presented them with. So
it is our duty to make people uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it really is. So that's what we do. All right, we got another caller lined up. All right, let me give the number out again. The number is 209 2877. That's the number to call to be a part of the show. Greatly appreciate those of you who do call in and contribute. I greatly appreciate those of you who come out to the events that we host. It's usually a good time. It allows us to get a little bit more personal and personable, and so I greatly appreciate that opportunity to meet with you and shake a hand. Offer perhaps some side conversations. All of that stuff is very important. I want to remind people we are in fund drive mode, so I'll give out the pledge line again. It is 516-620-3602. That's the number to call to donate to WBAI. Do it in the name of the show, and it helps us maintain our 2-hour platform. It helps us keep talkback radio an important part of what WBAI offers, something that is kind of unique. I mean, the idea of a 2-hour show that provides a full hour of your calls is something that that doesn't exist, and certainly one that offers a native perspective. So again, numbers 212-209-2877. That's the number to call to be a part of the show. Let's go to your calls. Caller, you're up next. What's your name and where are you calling from?
My name's Warren from New Jersey.
Hey, Warren. Is it Warren or Warren?
Warren.
Hi, Warren. Well, thanks for calling to be a part of the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, this will be short. I just want to let you know that, you guys are breaking up a lot. The last 3 days, I noticed a lot of the programs are breaking up a lot, and I think maybe it's just during when somebody's on the phone, but you get like half a conversation, and you kind of lose the point.
Okay, so you're saying the transmission isn't as clear as it could be?
Yeah, you'll get a lot of static, and then you'll miss a few words or a couple of sentences, and then you'll come back on. It's been doing this. I noticed yesterday and the day before.
Yeah, some of that is probably a little bit beyond our control because it has to do with the phone that somebody's using to call in.
What's happening, I'm sorry to interrupt you, John, but I just wanted to inform all the listeners out there that we've received a number of calls out there talking about this situation, and what's happened is it's a transmitter issue. It's not us. It's not us. It's a transmitter issue, and apparently there's going to be a major maintenance at the transmitter starting at 7 p.m. tomorrow. Okay. So we'll hopefully fix that.
All right.
Okay, great. Yeah, great. You guys.
Well, thanks for raising the issue and and giving us an opportunity to explain it. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
No. Good work. I agree with everything you guys are saying.
All right. Well, again, thanks for giving us an evaluation on how we're sounding out there, and even if it's pointing out a problem. And I'm glad that we not only are aware of it, but are addressing it. So, but I will say, do what you can to make sure that you are on the best possible phone line when you do call in, and make sure your radios are turned down. Make sure that your phone is close to you when you're talking and all that stuff. It all helps. So I appreciate that. All right, caller, you're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, John, this is Stahamili. How are you today?
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good. Calling from the WBAI Fight Back group. Yeah, we're trying to keep it real, bro. Thank you for all the information you put out today. It was good.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that I gave some attention to it, and I've kind of briefly mentioned it, but now we're getting down to crunch time. The idea that this group trying to again fulfill its attempted coup over not just WBAI but all of Pacifica is got a court backing them up. They're going to send out these ballots. Get these ballots sent out on the 15th. It's important that as many of our listeners as possible. The higher the percentage of feedback we get from our listeners, the better. We're going to need it all because frankly, our numbers are smaller than their numbers. So we're hoping that we're going to get some of the California listeners that won't agree with what this faction is doing. But I guarantee that they've got money and resources to make sure things are skewed their way, and we need to send a clear signal about what the WBAI listenership, how they feel about this, and how they feel about how strongly they feel about WBAI.
Right. We have to do that, and luckily there are people in the California stations that are working with us on our side. We're trying very hard to keep those lines of communications open with the folks in the station that are working there, and also some of the listeners, because when people hear the full story, I mean, a lot of people just sort of know the sort of superficial story that the rogue people on the board put out about, particularly about BAI.
Yeah.
And they don't know the full story. And when they actually hear the full story, then they're like, oh, I might have to, think about this a second time. And they understand that, their power and their position to be able to affect change and affect policy goes out the window, as well as everyone else's. So it's not just, that they're targeting certain people. They're targeting the listeners. They're targeting the producers. The producers have to be on board with us too. We have to speak to the producers at the stations as well.
Yeah, and it's important that people realize that they are essentially eliminating the local station boards. They are reducing the number of Pacifica National Board members, where only 5 of them will be elected by or listeners will have only input with 5 of those members in each of their stations. And 6 of them will be appointed, and we will have no sense for their agenda or anything else. I mean, it is,
and their replacements will be self-appointed, so we won't have any input to that. And it will be 6 against 5. The station, the people at the various stations send to the board will only be 5 in total.
They will always be in a minority to these appointed ones. Yeah, absolutely, or anointed, or whatever you want to call them. But
plus the fact that for the listeners, to become members, they are upping the amount of money that one would have to donate in order to be a member. It's now $25. It's going to go up. They're proposing through change of the bylaws to make it way more than the $25 that it is now. So again, if you don't have those kinds of funds, then you're being locked out as well. So there are various aspects of this in terms of how they are stripping the power from the people and control of the local boards and the local stations, but also centralizing the power, and also ultimately being able to centralize and homogenize what's going to go out on the stage.
And nothing they're doing addresses the one critical need, which is fundraising. I mean, there's nothing here other than this hint at the idea of selling off WBAI's FM signal. There's nothing that any of these changes do to address other means or other strategies for fundraising.
That's all they have.
And
that's all they have.
And that is the most. I mean, that's the 800-pound gorilla in the room.
That's the crux of the matter. Yeah. That is absolutely it, which is why BAI is really at risk.
Right.
And then part of the propaganda that they put out among the other stations about BAI is that BAI is always in financial need and is dragging down the network and all like that. But in reality, all of the stations are in need of money. They all have financial and fiscal problems. So exactly what you're saying is the case. They're not addressing the fiscal needs of the network, except to say that, if they can sell off the rights for BAI, then that's a magic solution for all the problems.
And it's only a temporary solution for the remaining stations, and who knows when they get put on the chopping block next. The biggest, the biggest issue is the failure to recognize the potential of something like WBAI. We are in the largest media market in the United States, and for anybody who can't see that, even if we haven't been able to realize the full potential ourselves, there, any effort to eliminate the station will put a nail in that. So I want to thank you for calling and again for having more of a conversation about this subject. It is so important. So again, I want to remind people, if you are a listener member, you will get a ballot sent out to you on February 15th. It is so important that you look for it and fill it out and send it in with your no vote. I can't express how important it is. All right, let me go to another caller. Caller, you're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yes, my name is Bambi, and I would like to make an observation and ask a question.
Sure.
My observation is that there are a lot true that the motive to open certain Indian schools was indeed to break the Indian or kill him, or however you use the term, but not all of the schools are that way. And maybe you might want to bring experiences of students who have indeed attended these various schools throughout the United States. And number two, I want to, and just continuing with that, there are schools that are respecting the ways of life of the natives and who are making sure that their pottery is continually to be created and all the other cultural things that natives normally do. And in some of the schools, that is enforced. So not all the residential schools were negative and prison torture chambers for the students. And I just wanted to know, since you indeed, Mr. Kane, are Native American, where does the name Kane come from? Was that a name imposed on you, or is that part of the Native culture?
All right, you gave us a lot to talk about there. First, I can address the name. No, that my name is not an original Native name. It is one of the, again, like so many Native people. You talked about the idea that people, in order to get licenses, they had to have the whole surname issue, and so I don't exactly know where the name Kane came from, but it's not. It probably came from the Bible. I don't know. I mean,
my last name is Scottish, so
it is not an original name. I don't call myself a Native American, so I want to. I always cringe a little bit. I'm not an American Indian. I'm not an Amerindian. Is that what it's called? Yeah. If I'm going to use a broad term, I'll use the word Native, but I'll leave it at that. I'm Gunjagahaga, which is our word for what most people know as Mohawk. I'm Ungwe, which is our word for a real human being, a native person. If I use my language, it won't be that clear to most people. But so I use a word, a benign word like native, and a native person as probably the more broad way to describe who I am. And I'm sorry, I just have to disagree with you. All residential schools had one design, which was assimilation. Now you can measure that in various increments of cruelty, I guess, and what level of abuse there was. But the idea of letting somebody maintain a pottery class is not the same thing as appreciating or acknowledging a distinct culture. These schools, most of them, they were government funded, and they were mostly church run. The whole idea that indoctrination into Christianity. I mean, I did my last show back home. I talked about the legacy of the doctrine of Christian discovery, and that legacy is black and brown Christians. I mean, the fact that so many black people and native people who were the victims of this racist church-based dogma would ultimately follow that faith. They would succumb to the pressures, and understand there were huge, incredible pressures. I mean, life-threatening pressures to look. The film that I showed last week, they showed a couple of people who died specifically because they could not and would not toe the line on their indoctrination, and that's what the experience was. Now, I have no interest in finding a Jew who enjoyed Nazi rule, and so I have no interest in trying to bring in somebody who's going to tell me how wonderful the residential school experience was, because by and large that experience was detrimental, and even if it was done in what some people would call a nice way, it's still genocide. If you are trying to make a person or people cease to exist by stripping away their culture, even if you think you're doing it gently, or if you're trying to indoctrinate somebody into American ideals, into changing how they sustain themselves, into, again, dropping any of their cultural background and picking up the Bible, if you're imposing that on somebody, even if you think it's being done in a nice way, it is still the idea of killing the Indian, And again, this is their upside. Kill the Indian, save the man.
I think
they
it's
believe
also,
they believed that they were by stripping away that savagery, that ignorance, that primitiveness, all those negative things that they associated with being native. They thought, oh, we could still have we could still have a vessel we could pump our stuff into.
We also need to, okay, so we can't, using this term that residential schools were nice or good or bad is just ignorant. Residential schools were a part of a federal, I mean, this is history. So residential schools were part of a federal program created in order to take indigenous folks off of our land and to reindoctrinate us through Christianity and assimilation. That's, if you want to say that it wasn't brutal, then you're ignorant. That is brutality. You're taking away our culture, our sovereignty, and imposing a belief system that is not our own. But if you think about that and you transpose it into the present, into the contemporary, that is the legacy of the colonized United States. The legacy is to destroy people of color in order to push forward a bastardized ideology of democracy or a bastardized ideology of nicety. So I think that
Civility, yeah,
you know,
that's the word.
In the end, residential schools were put on indigenous land by non-indigenous people to break us, to run us into the ground and literally to murder us, because that is the intention. Whether they saved, you know, the quote that's so often used as John said is the slogan, kill the Indian, save the man. In the end, it was kill the Indian. The idea was to remove us from this land so that the continuation of settler colonialism, which is based inherently on land property, could continue.
And there were things like, you know, again, tremendously high mortality rates, you know, that they attributed to tuberculosis because of not quarantining people, not providing adequate health care or any of that other stuff. Most of the deaths that took place in these residential schools were associated with abuse or neglect, malnourishment, again, physical abuse, sexual abuse. I feel strongly that much of the clergy sex abuse scandals that are rocking not only the Catholic Church but other churches, including the Baptist churches, have a direct tie back to these residential schools. There was also sterilization that was done. These schools and these churches literally had the power of attorney over these children with no oversight. There were no parents. There was no parent-teacher conferences. So whatever they wanted to do to these kids physically, mentally, and believe it or not, some of these kids actually had financial resources that were attributed to them. So they even had control of their finances. When I talk about Killers of the Flower Moon, that's an example of a people who had wealth. And if a residential school could get an Osage kid in there, that means that they had access to their money as well. So these are the kind of things. And it's great to say, well, you know, they're not all that bad. I mean, look, anytime I hear that, that's an apologist, and I'm sorry.
And we can't forget that residential schools are still happening. That especially south of the occupied border in Central and South America, indigenous children are stolen from their homes, in Australia as
Africa.
well, are stolen from their homes, put into schools in order to break them and then adopt them to white families.
And the foster care system is an extension of the whole residential school
legacy
thing as
of
well.
residential schools.
And that's something that, in spite of federal legislation, Indian Child Welfare Act, we still hear story after story after story. And of course, you also get to play with the U.S.-Canadian border that way. That way, you can get Native kids that are put into that are adopted out of Canada into the United States, and then they can avoid the federal regulations associated with the Indian Child Welfare Act. So much of this continues. So, and again, I'm not look. I understand that people who don't have adequate information may draw different conclusions from this stuff, but there is no way to paint a pretty picture about what Indian boarding schools and residential schools were all about. There's no question what they were about. All right, we'll go to another caller. Caller, you're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Oh, we got you.
Oh, is this me? Hello?
Yeah, you're up.
Oh, hey, John. Is this John Kane?
This is John Kane and Regan.
Oh, hey, John. This is Special Agent John Freer from the FBI. Set up a schedule to talk about Shawnee's disappearance.
No, she's not disappeared. We have not disappeared, Shawnee. We do miss her, but and she'll be back. She'll join us from time to time. But no, I can assure you that no harm has become of Shawnee Rice. So no. Did you have a comment, or you got? All right. I don't know anyway, look, I got a sense of humor. And I appreciate anybody who would be concerned. Look, I know that that Shawnee was a great addition to the show, and frankly, Shawnee is part of the reason that we now have Regan. So, I
also want to thank
that.
Shawnee because I know that she's listening. Just say thank you. You're the best, and can't wait to have you back here.
Yeah, and again, although neither you nor Shawnee were able to make it last Thursday. I know you guys had a conflict, but Shawnee still plans on making the events and that kind of stuff. So we're still connected. We're still close. So we'll hang in there. All right. Do we get somebody else? All right. Caller, you're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, John, it's Jeff from Union County, New Jersey. How
Hey,
are
Jeff,
you?
what's on your mind?
First of all, I'd like to welcome your new co-host, Reagan.
Hi, thank you.
And I'd also like to give a shout-out to Reggie because he is the third member of the team.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
Nobody left behind. You know how that goes.
Yeah,
anyway,
we'll send the Blackhawks in for him if we need to.
I appreciate that, John. Thank you.
Okay, anyway, I wanted to expand on something that you touched on earlier in the show about Rush Limbaugh getting the Medal of Freedom.
Okay.
How obscene is that? Let's think about that for a minute. I mean, here's a guy that's spread racial hatred and division for decades, and he gets the Medal of Freedom?
Well, and then they parade up. They parade up veterans, and again, I'm not big on glorifying war even, but when you bring somebody into this chamber and then you want to give this guy, look, I have problems with a lot of the whole medal stuff, and I'm not just talking about the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I know that there's been Purple Hearts and Congressional Medals of Honor given to people who were massacred people at Wounded Knee and people who committed incredible atrocities, and the whole idea of awarding people for some of this activity. And granted, I'm not saying everybody who ever, you'd like to think that most people who receive some sort of award did something positive to receive it. But when you see something like this, it taints all of it. When I know that there are, people who were shooting Native people like fish in a barrel who were given medals of honor or Purple Hearts or whatever else, to me that says none of those medals mean anything. And so what Trump just did with Rush Limbaugh says any of you who received that medal, it means nothing, and you should just throw it away.
What Trump did by giving that medal was just a distraction.
Yeah.
It's just a distraction from the continued systematic oppression of brown and black folks. It's just a distraction from continued settler colonial politics. So, we look at these things and we're like, oh, how could he, But in the end, this is all just a distraction to keep us away from larger issues.
Well, and then the public outcry or this very public announcement that Limbaugh has cancer. I mean, talk about a cry for pity. I mean, it is really pathetic. Frankly, I could give a rat's ass whether Rush Limbaugh has cancer or not. And in fact, I know people who I treasured in my life that I lost to cancer. Not this guy. In fact, I'm one of the folks who have a problem with this whole notion of man-made good versus evil thing. Cancer exists almost because of man, because of so much of what man has done, and I'm not a believer in karma either, but because I know a lot of good people who have suffered tragically to this disease. Limbaugh's not one of them. In fact, this is one of those rare occasions that I'm rooting for cancer. Yeah, I know.
Oh no, I'm more just.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did.
So so you wasn't big on the whole fact that he was addicted to opioids previously.
just don't understand why we're giving energy or attention to someone who just capitalizes off of our oppression.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
absolutely.
wait a minute. Let's speak to what Reggie just said. Let's not forget that he had said that drug addicts should be executed.
Yeah, and also, I mean, even as I look at the opioid, problem, look, when it was people of color who had alcohol and crack and all kinds of other stuff, introduced into their culture to keep them down, it was always about criminalizing it. And then when a white guy like this guy goes around and doctor shops so he can fulfill his addiction, it's like, oh no, he doesn't need to be punished. He needs to be treated. He needs treatment.
Yeah.
Well,
now it's a disease, not a crime.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Jeff, I appreciate the call, and like like I said, I agree with with Regan completely. This, Rush Limbaugh is a distraction, and I don't want to give him a whole lot of time. But I do have to bring up things like when I hear a comment like Manifest Destiny and some of this other stuff. I mean, that's the only reason I gave any attention to any of what Trump had to say.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, all right. Time's winding down. We've got about 5 minutes left, so we probably have time for 2 more callers. So let's try to get them through here. Caller, you're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Thank you for taking my call. I'm Ewan. I'm calling from.
All right. What's on your? Yeah. Thanks for calling. I appreciate it. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to make a comment about the lady that spoke about the fact that some of the Indian schools were not so bad and that they were done properly. Just the mere fact that someone would indoctrinate someone, it's violent. And
Absolutely.
For you to even think that anything in indoctrination is nice, I mean, it's just that you're not in this world, you're sleeping,
Well, and here's the problem with trying to, suggest that they weren't all that bad. The clergy sex abuse scandal, for instance. I mean, you've got the Catholic Church that covered up this stuff, and now you've got various, parts of the Catholic Church they want to declare bankruptcy to protect themselves from the the financial obligations that they may have to pay. I mean, this is an organization in the Catholic Church and many of the other churches that profited. They took billions of dollars, trillions of dollars out of native territories and built up this legacy that would turn into this sex abuse scandal. I mean, look, not every priest was a molester or a pedophile, but there were plenty of other priests who covered up for them, plenty of nuns that did it as well. And of course, there was sex abuse performed by both by male and female parts of these churches. So, I mean, it's the same thing with police. Not every policeman may be, a psychopath. But if the police department is going to defend, these murders, this death by cop, if they're going to cover for each other, then it's a little hard for me to say that it's more than just a few bad apples. So
I think that's where you and I are going to have to agree, John. I believe that all cops participate in a system of oppression, whether they are a good cop or a bad cop, which it doesn't exist. All cops. I mean, it's ACAB. All cops are.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So in the end, they're all participating in this continued systematic oppression. So I think that we cannot participate in the erasure of residential school history by trying to whitewash it and say that it was okay, it was nice, it provided support. Because in the end, just like cops, it was just a larger participation in white supremacy.
Absolutely. All right, I got time for one more call real quick, so let's try to get one more caller before we have to go. Caller, you're up next. You're up last. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, John, this is George from New Jersey. I just wanted to say something about the fundraiser. You have these... you have these showings at this place, right? The movie showings and stuff like that?
Yep.
Why don't you guys have a staying out of business party or something like that? Some kind of function that you can get the people to gather around. And I don't care if it's a yard sale or a party. a picnic, do what John Belushi would do, throw a toga party and accept donations or something. How that could be
look,
done,
I agree that we've got to think outside the box that we've been sitting in for all these years, and the reason I do my events is to at least try to raise a little bit. I mean, I don't pay charge at the door, but I do collect donations. We raised $250 last week that goes to expenses here. We do need to do more, and I think I do agree with you. The more we can do it within the community, the better. I think the more community engagement we have, and I think the problem with just relying on fund drives on the radio is that it limits us and it doesn't put us into the community. So I think we need to come up with some other solutions, and look, we are open to suggestions, and so I appreciate the call. Look, I want to thank Regan for her first day with me anyway. I know you've been on this show before. You've joined Shawnee, so I appreciate you stepping up and being a team member here.
Absolutely, I'm so excited. I'm looking forward to even more.
All right, and there will be plenty. And again, I'm really looking to some of your suggestions on not only show topics but even events that we can do. We can do more than just the monthly event at the Brooklyn Commons. It's one of the things that we do, but I would really like to do more. So I want to thank you for making your way in today, and hopefully the subways are kind to both of us as we
can't make any promises.
Yeah, no problem. But I will not be shutting them down this trip, but who knows what we'll do next time. I want to thank you for coming in. I want to thank all of you who've called in, and I want to thank you, the listeners, who I'm going to assume some of you called the pledge line, and I'm going to give it one more time: 516-620-3602. That's the number to call to make a donation to Let's Talk and WBAI. This is John Kane with Regan. This is Let's Talk. Yahweh.